Hello, Stefan.
Hi.
Welcome to Poland.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Can you tell us the main secret? What's your main reason of this visit? Are you on vacation?
No, on vacation I generally don't get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to start a work day. So no, I'm not on vacation, although I'm enjoying my time here, but we flew in yesterday, and I have some affinity with Poland. I know that my first name is Stefan with an F, which is very Polish. And I've been fascinated by Poland for quite some time. I read about a lot of Polish history when I was younger, and I thought what a wonderful time to come to Poland when there's the 100th anniversary on the 11th. And so I thought, well, I'm coming to Poland anyway. Why don't I get a crew, and why don't we do some interviews and turn it into something that is a window into Poland, which a lot of the rest of the world doesn't have. So a lot of the rest of the world's media is very left, as you know. And as leftists, they don't like the fact that Poland is nationalistic. They don't like the fact that Poland is largely culturally homogenous. They don't like the fact that Poland is standing up against migrant policy and that's defying the EU. And so because it's going against this globalist, collectivist, open borders, damn your own history that's being inflicted on so many other Western nations, you don't hear a lot about Poland. So I kind of wanted to open up that portal so people could see what's going on here.
So you think that Poland is some kind of a poster boy for actually what? For a kind of renaissance against globalist, collectivist utopia or something like that?
So Poland is tragically, and a lot of the Central Eastern European countries that were under the Soviet Union, they are tragically the Western country with the most recent and horrible experience of collectivism, socialism, communism, central planning, secret police, all of the stuff that the left generally generates. So because it has the most recent trauma in Europe, it has the freshest perspective on collectivism and socialism, and having fought its way free of socialist domination for decades, it doesn't want to surrender itself. Oh, we're free from the USSR, let's go surrender ourselves to the EU. Not to directly equate the two, but there is this collectivist general idea. I mean, the USSR was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, so it was an umbrella for smaller countries. Same thing with the EU. So I think it has a robustness that comes out of its recent experience with collectivism to fight back against the collectivism of the EU. And as such, if one country can do it, it gives ideas to other countries. And I think there's something very heroic about that.
You know, if I were not a Polish citizen, I would probably believe that Poland is some kind of by listening to you, a place where we could, I don't know, experiment with free market, libertarian ideas or things like that. But you actually know that it's not.
Well, this is a bit of a pendulum, and it's kind of a tragic thing to see, which is that you have this collectivism, and then you swing to more free markets. And then everyone says, hey, we've got all this relative wealth, and so now we can start experimenting with social programs and government spending and debt and social engineering, and the leftist rot comes in when there's increased comfort in the economy. And
I would disagree on that little tiny thing. We're not there yet. We're not in that comfort zone where you're fat and you can skin a bit. No, it's not yet there. And I think that politicians are blaming free market that actually doesn't exist, because that's what they say in a second sentence. So they blame free market on everything. We're not there yet because we have too much, market liberty, is to quote Macron. He just said like 3 days ago, right? That Europe is going extremely free market. That's why we have Marine Le Pen in France or things like that.
I mean, I don't think Europe is in danger of overdosing on the free market anytime soon. But I think Poland is kind of at a tipping point, because the hollowing out of the younger generation that goes overseas means that you have an aging population which require a lot of government spending. If there's a hollowing out of the next generation, the great temptation is to fill it in with migration, to fill it in with immigration, and say, well, we didn't have enough kids, or the kids aren't available, they've gone to England or other places. So what we'll do is we'll just bring a bunch of people in from India or from other places in the third world, and then we get instant taxpayers. It's going to be wonderful. It drives down the wages, which the capitalists quote like. And the problem is that all of the problems of integration, the problems of tribalism, the problems of multiculturalism and diversity really generally only accrue to the next generation. It's kind of like a national debt. You can spend it and enjoy it now, and it's the unborn who will have to pay.
Yeah, kick the can.
Yeah, so I'm here to sort of remind that it's one thing to take people from Belarus and from the Ukraine and so on, or from Ukraine. They will integrate very well. Similar history, same race and so on. But when you start bringing in people from the third world, it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different situation. You end up with charges of racism. You end up with the left being able to use identity politics against each other. Maybe multiracial societies can work in the future, but one of the reasons they can't work right now is that the left constantly tells the non-white races that whites are oppressive and racist and privileged and mean and exploitive and so on. So because the left uses tribalism as a wedge and division point, it means that multiracial societies can't work now because of the left. Whether they could ever work, I don't know, because we've never seen one where the left is not in there immediately trying to foment dissent and opposition between the races. But you may get some skills now, you may get some lower wages now, which is, you know, good for the employer or not so good for the employee, but it's a generalized disaster down the road. You end up with identity politics, you end up with endless charges of racism, you end up with human rights lawsuits all the time, you end up with diversity mandates, and it just becomes a nightmare, largely, I think, because of the left. And so until the left stops race baiting, multiracial societies don't seem to be working. They don't seem to work, and I don't think they're going to stop race baiting anytime soon.
Me neither. Speaking about economy, are you still in the team of free market defenders? Would you call yourself a free market guy?
Oh, you see, now I have to clarify that.
Exactly.
Because I'm a free market guy who's so free market, people don't even understand what I'm talking about. So I'm a free market guy to the point where I think that the market, the free market, should solve every conceivable problem in society. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter. National defense should be solved by the free market. Criminality, courts, prisons, welfare, roads, all of this should be solved by the free market. So people think, well, the free market is, you know, well, there's a lot of government control and intervention and tax. None of that is part of the free market. So I'm not just a free market guy. I am such a free market guy that people don't even really understand what it is that I'm talking about.
This is beyond Rothbard or not there yet?
Well, no, see, now Rothbard, yeah, I would say it's very close to what Rothbard would have, and probably we would be in the same camp for most of it. So for those who don't know, this is Murray Rothbard, who with Man, Economy and State and other, so he was technically what is called an anarcho-capitalist, which means that it's anarchism, but not the leftist collectivist anarchism, but a strong individualistic free market anarchism. Anarchism is a word that's been so corrupted, I hesitate to use it. You can call it voluntarism, or you can call it, sometimes people refer to it anarcho-capitalism and so on, but it basically is the idea that property rights are absolute. You cannot initiate the use of force against others, and that precludes the moral validity of a state as a central organizer of society, because a state initiates the use of force and the state violates property rights through taxation. So if you're going to defend property, you have free market mechanisms that are going to do it. And just for those who want to follow up on more of this, you can read, of course, Murray Rothbard. I've written 2 books, Everyday Anarchy and Practical Anarchy, which people can get for free on my website at freedomainradio.com, where I go into how market solutions can operate to solve some of the thorniest and most complex social issues in very effective ways.
Because 2 weeks ago, maybe not speaking not about Rothbard, but about different author that is very popular among libertarians, Ayn Rand. About 2 weeks ago, we quoted a huge chunk of Atlas Shrugged, the part with the train just before the tragedy, right? And I was like, God damn it, this is the Stefan I used to listen like 4 years ago. Yeah. That was before this huge, I don't know, libertarian divorce, 2016. I don't know, because, you know, I'm speaking from a perspective of a guy who lives in Europe. I lived in Spain for 8 years, now I live in Poland. And I used to listen to Free Domain Radio really in early days. And that was great. That was a philosophical show. That was a pro-free market show, pro-liberty show with this philosophical backbone. And I thought that is great because this is something that we are missing in this Austrian School of Economics crowd. You know, this is too fertile, in my opinion. Once you put morality and philosophy behind it, it makes sense. It becomes a living creature. And then you started, I don't know how to say it.
You can say it.
I don't want to go into, you know, big L, small L, libertarian party, whatever bullshit, because I don't even want to go there. But you started cheering for the MAGA team at some point, and I would say that the MAGA team and Polish MAGA team, which is the pro-independence, sovereignty crowd that we are having right now on the streets, they are not the Ayn Rand people. They are not the guys. If you would strip what Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are saying, if you would just strip the names, they would actually subscribe to that notion.
Who would? Oh, the MAGA crowd, you think?
The Polish version of a MAGA crowd,
right.
The Polish Trump supporters, let's say it. So what is your role there? Are you some kind of a mole that's trying to infiltrate MAGA team and teach them some objectivism?
The way that I think of it, and this is all very fair, right? I mean, so first of all, I can't keep doing the same shows over and over again, right? I mean, so I did years of that stuff, and I still stand by it all. Nothing has changed because the arguments remain the same. But it's kind of like, let's say, so you and I are doing this interview, right? So if you're watching this, you'll know we're doing this interview. Now, let's say you and I are doing this interview, and we're talking about ideas, and arguments, and philosophy. And suddenly, we smell smoke. And then we feel heat. And smoke comes pouring through that door, and then suddenly we're like, wow, we better interrupt this conversation because the venue appears to be on fire, right? And then we start dealing with the venue. We get, what is it you do? You get wet towels, you put them under the door to prevent the smoke from coming in, and we ask if there's anyone who needs any help, and we are now dealing with the emergency called the fire. Now, people would then say, you guys don't care about ideas anymore? You're not talking about ideas anymore. You're talking about some fire.
So we have to abandon the free market principles to say free market.
No, we are not. No, listen. We are not abandoning the realm of ideas when we deal with a fire that is breaking out during a conversation. We are saying we both wish to survive to the point where we can continue this conversation. Because if we pretend there's no fire and we all get, what you and I get burned to death, we don't get to have any more conversations.
Do you think we are on the brink of that situation?
Oh, demographically, there's no doubt whatsoever. There's no doubt whatsoever that the importation of tens and tens and tens of millions of socialist-leaning, collectivist-leaning, leftist voting third worlders into the West, we have to recognize that reality. And we can't just continue as if we have all the time in the world, because they will relentlessly vote for the left and they will relentlessly vote for collectivism. And because we have a democratic system right now, we will not be able to continue to have this conversation, because when you start voting, when you get huge voting blocks for the leftist collectivists, what they immediately start doing is they start putting in laws to restrict your freedom of speech.
But I'm having that feeling that we already have those collectivists in power, no matter if they are from Republican, Tory, Labour, Democratic Party. Maybe the scale is different, the saturation is different, but they are already there. It's all social democracy.
No, I get that, and this is the critique of the Conservatives in the UK, the Republicans in America, the Conservatives in Canada and other places, and even here, that they will talk about the free market and they may oppose certain aspects of socialism, but it's basically, conservatism is just slow motion socialism, that they're going to end up in the same place. And what happens, the way that it transfers, is pretty obvious and easy to see. He said redundantly, but what happens is if you question or criticize the left, they will viciously attack you using their mouthpieces in the media, and they will try to destroy your source of income and destroy your reputation. So then what you do is you say, okay, well, I'll appease them by adopting some of their positions.
Never works.
Well, it works for the left.
Never happy.
No, of course, because what you've done is you've said, oh, the personal attacks.
It's possible, yeah.
Well, I will reward your personal attacks by adopting your positions, and so that's the conservative movements in the West are generally they're victims of verbal abuse, and they've been traumatized, and they Stockholm syndrome to the point where they'll just, like Trump. I mean, I love the guy in a lot of ways, but he's not talking about Social Security, he's not talking about the welfare state, he's not talking about Medicare, Medicaid, and so on, right? Because that's all, well, also he doesn't have much control over it, it's all mandated spending. But it's a multi-generational solution to increased collectivism and socialism. You need a multi-generational solution.
You're producing a documentary right now, but it's not going to be only about Polish situation, right?
Well, it's general philosophical principles with Poland as the specific example at the moment.
Okay. What length of this documentary are you suggesting is going to be?
Length?
How long is going to be?
Well, it depends how good the interviews are, right? I mean, if we get a whole bunch of crackerjack interviews, then it will be longer, and if we have to trim them down, it will be shorter, but it will be just the right length, depending on the footage that we get.
But it's going to be 20 minutes more like
No, longer. No, longer. We've got 8 to 10 interviews going on at the moment. So, and then there's going to be the celebrations, there's going to be street footage, I'm going to go talk to some leftists, there's going to be a wide variety of conversations that I'm going to be having along with solo speeches, so I don't know. I mean, this is the first time I've done this kind of thing, so I don't really know how long it's going to be, but it will all be interesting, and it will be just the right length.
Have you been watching yesterday's sensational, pivotal moments of change with the decisions about whether there's going to be a green light or red light on this march on 11th?
Oh, it's
I've spent like 3 hours on Twitter just looking at it.
It's wretched. It's wretched. And of course, what they do is they say, well, there are these far-right elements and evoke the Nazis and therefore blah, 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 right? I mean, it's all ridiculous. I mean, the leftists are openly committed. Now, I don't know about in Poland, but they're like Antifa and the hard leftists are openly committed to violence, openly committed to, by any means necessary, openly use tactics of intimidation and aggression and threats. And yet somehow people who are very nationalistic are the real problem. And they just invented, this is like the ghost hysteria. It's like watching people think that there are zombies in every teacup. I mean, they just make up this Nazi thing so that they can suppress any expression of legitimate patriotic pride in order to open your borders.
We had some episodes with Antifa that was actually invited by Polish leftist organization from Germany, and that was even before Occupy Wall Street movement. So that was ages ago. You know, YouTube was in Square, in mono, and
much younger back in 240p. Yeah,
exactly.
And the Antifa in Germany are particularly feral, as far as I understand.
German Antifa was invited here to bring peace and help preserve.
They made a desert and called it peace. I think we do have to wrap up. So if
yes.
you want to just do a closing bit.
Prediction about Russian probe.
Oh, the Russian probe is history. No, I mean, it's all been nonsense. It's all been made up. Trump has been a patriotic American for his entire adult life, and he was no more accused of collusion with foreign governments than he was accused of being a racist before he went against the Democrats. So the Russia probe is about as useful to the left now as Christine Blasey Ford. It's just going to be tossed out the window, and they'll move on to the next hysterical accusation, which everybody will swallow.